Hello, everyone, and welcome to Documentaries with Abbie Dagrin. And today I'll be doing a documentary about Bravo stars. It's kind of like a Bravo to jail pipeline. So I'll be speaking on all of the people who have been arrested and gone to jail and the people who were just arrested. So please stay tuned for the rest of the documentary. So our first person on the list, which is the most recent one, would be Karen Huger. In March 2024, she was arrested after crashing her Maserati while driving under the influence in Montgomery County, Maryland. So while she was arrested, her husband Ray did come out to speak to the officers and try to see what happened. And during the video that would later come out close to when her trial would begin, we would see her slurring her words, as well as saying things such as she was Andrew Jackson's concubine, which did not help her case at all. She was offered a plea deal of 60 days in jail for her fourth DUI offense. However, she rejected that deal and wanted to go to trial. During trial, she would be found guilty and sentenced to 2 years in jail, with 1 year suspended. In addition to jail time, she was ordered to pay $2,900 in fines and serve 5 years on probation. Now, the charges that she was charged with were multiple offenses, including driving under the influence, negligent driving, and failure to control her speed. And also more information as to why the judge gave her the sentence was that this was her fourth DUI offense in 17 years. And he said he would not wait on the fifth offense before being sentenced to jail time. So Karen was sentenced on February 26, 2025, and she was taken into custody right after the sentencing. Also, on April 18, 2025, we got some information from the Washington Post that said her work release was denied, and there's a high possibility that she will remain in prison until November 2025, and then she may have the chance of being released early based off of good conduct credits. Up next on the list would be Jennifer Shaw from Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And according to the United States Attorney's Office, Southern District of New York's website, they talked about how she ran a nationwide telemarketing fraud scheme, and she was sentenced to 78 months in prison. Damian Williams, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, announced that Jennifer Shaw was sentenced today by United States District Judge Sidney H. Stein to 78 months in prison for running a nationwide telemarketing fraud scheme. Shaw previously pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud in connection with telemarketing. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams said, with today's sentence, Jennifer Shaw finally faces the consequence of the many years she spent targeting vulnerable elderly victims. These individuals were lured in by false promises of financial security, but in reality, Shaw and her co-conspirators defrauded them out of their savings and left them with nothing to show for it. This conviction and sentence demonstrate once again that we will continue to vigorously protect victims of financial fraud and hold accountable those who engage in fraudulent schemes. And according to the superseding indictment and statements made in court proceedings and files, from at least 2012 until her arrest in March 2021, Shaw was an integral leader of a wide-ranging national telemarketing fraud scheme that victimized thousands of innocent people. The scheme principally involved selling those victims so-called business services in connection with the victim's purported online businesses. In particular, Shaw knowingly and intentionally facilitated the sales of leads, contact information for potential victims who had been identified as susceptible to scheme lies, to sale floors that were perpetrating the business opportunity scheme. And during the later portion of her participation in the scheme, owned and operated one of the sales floors that was part of the scheme. Sadly, the majority of her victims were elderly or vulnerable, and these people suffered a lot of financial hardships and damage at Shaw's direction. And sadly, a lot of her victims were defrauded over and over again until they had nothing. She and her co-conspirators persisted in their conduct until the victims' bank accounts were empty, their credit cards were at their limits, and there was nothing more to take. Also continuing from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of New York, aside from her 78 months in prison, she was also sentenced to forfeit $6.5 million, 30 luxury items, 78 counterfeit luxury items, and pay $6,045,251 in restitution. So she will be able to be released on October 4th, 2026, because previously it was November 2026, but she was able to have this date of her being released from prison. Next on the list would be Teresa and Joe Giudice. So according to the United States Attorney's Office, District of New Jersey, Teresa and Joe are sentenced to prison for conspiracy, bankruptcy, fraud, and tax offenses. Teresa and Joe were both sentenced to 15 months and 41 months in prison, respectively. Both defendants previously pleaded guilty before U.S. District Judge Esther Salas in Newark Federal Court to several counts of the superseding indictment returned against them in July 2013. The Giudices each pleaded guilty in one count of conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud, one count of bankruptcy fraud by concealment of assets, one count of bankruptcy fraud by false oaths, and one count of bankruptcy fraud by false declaration. Joe Giudice also pleaded guilty in one count of failure to file a tax return. Judge Salas also imposed the sentences today. Today meaning October 2nd, 2014. Judge Salas ordered Teresa Giudice to report to the Bureau of Prisons on January 5th, 2015 to begin serving her sentence. Joe Giudice will report to serve his sentence after his wife finishes serving her prison term. So, the U.S. Attorney Fishman said the Giudices together deceived financial institutions with patently false loans applications, were dishonest when they sought the protection of the bankruptcy court, and hid assets and income from the trustees. And Joe Giudice cheated the government by failing to pay taxes on years of significant income. When they pleaded guilty, both admitted swearing to statements they knew were lies. Prison is the appropriate penalty for these serious financial crimes. They go on to say that they chose lies over the truth when dealing with the IRS, banks, and the bankruptcy court will not be tolerated. Roberta A. DeAngelis, U.S. trustee for Delaware, said, concealing assets and lying in a bankruptcy case are crimes deserving of punishment. The Giudices remain responsible for paying their debts. They lost the protection our bankruptcy law affords debtors because they broke the law to obtain it. According to the documents filed in this case, the statements made in court from September 2001 through September 2008, Joe and Teresa engaged in a mail and wire fraud conspiracy in which they submitted fraudulent applications and supporting documents to lenders in order to obtain mortgages and other loans. The Giudices falsely represented on loan applications and supporting documents that they were employed and are receiving substantial salaries when they were either not employed or not receiving such salaries. The United States Attorney Office, District of New Jersey continues. In September 2001, Teresa applied for a $121,500 mortgage loan for which she submitted a loan application falsely claiming she was employed as an executive assistant. She also submitted fake W-2 forms and fake pay stubs purportedly issued by her employer for $361,250 mortgage loans that Teresa obtained in July 2005. She and Joe Giudice prepared a loan application which falsely stated she was employed as a realtor and that she made monthly salary of $15,000. In fact, Teresa Giudice was not employed at all at this time. It continues on to say October 29, 2009, they filed a petition for individual Chapter 7 bankruptcy protection in U.S. Bankruptcy Court in Newark. Over the next few months, they filed several amendments to the bankruptcy petition. As part of the bankruptcy filings, the Giudices were required to disclose to the United States trustee their asset, liabilities, income, and any anticipated increase in income. The Giudices intentionally concealed businesses they own, income they received from rental properties, and Teresa Giudice's true income from the television show Real Housewives of New Jersey, website sales, and personal magazine appearances. The Giudices concealed their anticipated increase in income from the then incoming second season of the show. They also testified falsely under oath in bankruptcy proceedings when questioned about their assets and income. Joe Giudice also admitted that during tax years 2004 through 2008, he received income totaling $996,459, but did not file tax returns for those years. In addition to the prison term, Judge Salas sentenced Joe and Teresa Giudice each to 2 years of supervised release and ordered the couple to forfeit $414,588. Additionally, the judge fined Joe Giudice $10,000 and fined Teresa Giudice $8,000. Joe Giudice was advised by the court that he faces deportation after serving his sentence. That decision will be made by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is ICE, following completion of his prison sentence. And as we know, Joe Giudice was deported back to Italy after his sentence, but he ended up moving to the Bahamas. Next up would be Kim Richards from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So according to Yahoo Entertainment, in April 2015, Kim was arrested at the Beverly Hills Hotel after allegedly having too much to drink and was disturbing some of the other patrons. Per a police report obtained by U.S. at the time, Kim spent the night in jail and was released the next morning on bail for $20,000. Kim was charged with public intoxication, trespassing, resisting arrest, battery on a police officer. She pleaded no contest and was later sentenced to 52 Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and 30 days of community labor. A few months after her public intoxication arrest, Kim found herself again arrested as she was caught stealing from Target in San Fernando Valley, California. Law enforcement told U.S. Weekly at the time that Kim spent the night in jail and was released the following day on a $5,000 bond. She would later plead no contest to one count of petty theft. Up next would be Tinsley Mortimer, and in 2017 she was arrested over the weekend after police found her crying and screaming outside the Palm Beach house of her wealthy ex, who was inside with another woman. The former Dior beauty ambassador and high society star, who now goes by her maiden name, Mercer, following her divorce from oil heir Topper, was outside the home of Nico Frangel, the son of sugar baron Alexander Frangel, when she was hauled away on Saturday. According to the police report, Mercer was crying and screaming irrationally, stating that her boyfriend Nico was inside the house with another woman. And this information is followed from page 6, and page 6 continues. She claimed at the time she only wanted to retrieve her purse from inside, but Fangirl said he did not have it. Fangirl stated that he was inside the house with his new girlfriend, while Mercer was outside screaming at him. And that night, she was booked into the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, and she was released around 8:30 that time, but she was booked on a misdemeanor charge. Next up would be Luann de Lesseps, and on December 2017, she was arrested because she reportedly attacked a police officer in Palm Beach, Florida. Nearly 1 year after she wedded her ex, Tom, she was charged with disorderly intoxication, battery on an officer, police officer, firefighter, EMT, resisting arrest with violence, and threatening a public servant, according to the Palm Beach County Sheriff Office. According to Peoples, Luann appeared to complete her community service. Probation officers claimed in the May 2019 report that Luann failed her alcohol test and later admitted to drinking 2 glasses of mimosas after a performance she had in Chicago. The documents also alleged that Luann had previously violated her probation by failing to provide sufficient documentation of completed AA meetings. To her West Palm Beach-based probation officer, according to her papers, Luann had only provided documentation from 5 meetings, even though she was ordered to do 2 meetings per week. So the Palm Beach County judge actually took her into custody, but he later released her after admitting she violated this probation. The judge reinstated and added on new terms to Leanne's probation, and including weekly phone counseling sessions, monthly in-person meetings with a psychiatrist, taking medication to treat alcoholism, as well as keeping a breathalyzer in the car. And on August 29, 2019, she officially completed her 1-year probation sentence. Next up would be Portia Williams. So Portia Williams had a few times that she went to jail. So first off would be in 2014 when she assaulted Kenya during the Real Housewives of Atlanta reunion on national TV. Kenya Moore filed charges. And according to CNN, on April 16th, Portia turned in herself for simple battery charge and a misdemeanor. She had her mugshot taken and was released on a $2,000 bond. On July 14th, 2020, she was also arrested during the protest of Breonna Taylor, and protesters were given the opportunity to leave and were told they would be breaking the law by staying on the property that they were protesting on. 87 people were arrested and charged due to their refusal to leave the property and their attempts to influence the decision of the Attorney General with their actions. According to TMZ, in the early hours of July 15th, she was able to be released from jail. Up next would be Peter Thomas. So according to the United States Attorney Office, Western District of North Carolina, Peter Thomas was sentenced to prison for tax offense. The defendant failed to pay over more than $2.5 million in employment taxes for restaurant and nightclubs in Charlotte, Miami, and Baltimore. 63-year-old Peter Thomas was sentenced today to 18 months in prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release for tax offense, announced Dana J. King, U.S. Attorney for the Western District of North Carolina. Thomas was also ordered to pay $2,526,131.99 as restitution to the IRS on July 2, 2024. Thomas pleaded guilty to failing to account for and pay over to the trust fund taxes due and owing on behalf of the employees of the PT Media LLC for the quarter ending June 30, 2021. According to the filed documents in today's sentencing hearing and today as in December 19, 2024, Thomas was the owner of Club 1, CLT LLC Sports 1, INC, and many other businesses, which operated as sports-themed bar, restaurant, lounges in Charlotte. Thomas also owned several other bars, restaurants, and lounges in Florida and Maryland, including Bar 1 Miami Beach LLC and Bar 1 Baltimore LLC. Thomas exercised control over the Charlotte businesses' financial and business affairs and was responsible for collecting trust fund taxes and accounting for employment taxes by filing 941 with the IRS and paying over to the IRS the employment taxes for the Charlotte business employees. Between 2017 and 2022, Thomas caused the Charlotte businesses to collect more than $640,000 in trust fund taxes from the wages of their employees, but Thomas did not pay over these taxes to the IRS. In addition, between 2021 and 2023, Thomas caused Bar 1 Miami Beach LLC and Bar 1 Baltimore LLC to collect more than $1.1 million in trust fund taxes from the wages of their employees, but Thomas did not pay over these taxes to the IRS. In between 2017 and 2023, Thomas caused the Charlotte businesses Bar 1 Miami Beach LLC and Bar 1 Baltimore LLC to fail to pay over more than $2.5 million in employment taxes, including more than $1,740,000 in trust fund taxes from the wages of their employees. Court documents show that instead of paying the trust fund taxes that were due on behalf of the Charlotte businesses, Thomas used the trust fund taxes for other purposes, including more than $2.5 million in cash withdrawals, $370,000 for travel, real estate purchases, and more than $250,000 in retail purchases, including high-end purchases at Neiman Marcus, Prada, Louis Vuitton, and Givenchy. Thomas also caused more than $2.9 million to be transferred from the Charlotte businesses Bar 1 Miami Beach LLC and Bar 1 Baltimore LLC. Thomas was ordered to report to the FB of prisons upon designation of federal facilities. And as of today, he did surrender himself and report to prison. However, there's a high possibility that he may be out in 2026. Last but not least would be Apollo Nita, and he did have a few times that he has been in and out of prison. The one we'll focus on the most would be when he conspired and was sentenced for conspiring to commit mail, wire, and bank fraud. So this is from the United States Attorney Office of the Northern District of Georgia. So this was written in July 8th, 2014. So Apollo was sentenced today for conspiring to commit mail, wire, and bank fraud in a complex fraud scheme which spanned over 4 years and harmed over 50 victims. So, attorney Sally Quillian Yates said this defendant organized 2 separate fake collection agencies, used them to harvest data from databases like Equifax and LexisNexis, and then deployed that data to identity theft attacks tailored to vulnerabilities and characteristics of each victim. According to the United States Attorney Yates, the charges and other information presented in court, beginning in August 2009, Apollo and others obtained stolen checks by stealing them or buying them from other criminal associates. The stolen checks involved in the scheme included United States Treasury checks, as well as checks stolen from the pension fund of Delta Airlines. Additionally, the conspirators obtained funds by filing fraudulent tax returns with the IRS and making fraudulent claims against the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. In at least 11 states, all the names of the victims whose identities had been stolen. Another thing that they did was obtain fraudulent auto loans secured by vehicles that had no ownership interest, and they would convince the banks to issue these loans by creating fake documents and websites appearing to belong to legitimate auto dealerships. Once the co-conspirators obtained the stolen checks, they laundered them through numerous victim financial institutions. Often the conspirators laundered the checks by opening bank accounts in the name of the payees listed on the face of the checks. Continuing on, the illegal conduct ended only when agents of the U.S. Secret Service confronted Apollo and seized his laptop computer pursuant to a search warrant on September 13, 2013. Apollo was sentenced to 8 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. He was released in 2019 and was sentenced to 5 years of probation. However, in 2004, Apollo was arrested again for assault on his wife, and she accused him of being physical. He was charged with DV and simple assault per court documents obtained by InTouch, and this is according to US Weekly. He had posted a $3,000 bond and was released hours later. Thank you guys so much for watching this video or listening to it on the podcast. I did not do all of them, so I will be making a part 2 with the Bravo to jail pipeline, unfortunately. However, the next ones would be like very short arrests, not too serious like these ones that I just spoke on. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure you've hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in my next video.